As over 9,000 children in Gaza suffer from malnutrition in 2025 and famine looms, the world must confront its silence. This thought leadership video explores the roots of the crisis, failed responses, and what real moral action must look like today. In 2025, the images from Gaza are not just tragic, they are morally indicting. Frail bodies, hollow eyes, and the desperate cries of children fill makeshift hospitals that have become war zone triage centers. According to UNICEF, over 9,000 children in Gaza have been treated for malnutrition this year alone. And yet, aid remains stalled. Governments issue statements. The world watches. But children, many of them infants, are dying preventable deaths, one by one. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza is not new. But today, it has reached an unbearable crescendo. Starvation is not a byproduct of natural disaster, it is the direct outcome of policy decisions, military strategies, and geopolitical deadlock. In a world overflowing with wealth, technology, and global institutions designed to protect the vulnerable, we must ask ourselves, how did we allow this to happen? The numbers are real. So is the pain. UNICEF's report that over 9,000 children have already been treated for malnutrition should alarm every conscience. These aren't just statistics, they are tiny lives, each with a name, a mother, a dream. Doctors in Gaza's few operational hospitals report children arriving with visible rib cages, sunken eyes, and severely weakened immune systems. Some are too weak to cry. Mothers speak of feeding their children boiled water flavored with salt or vinegar. Families dilute powdered baby formula to make it last longer. Parents skip meals for days just to provide a bite for their children. The specter of famine is no longer a distant threat, it is already here. Why aid isn't getting through? Israel has allowed some aid trucks into Gaza, but the delivery mechanisms are broken. Humanitarian organizations warn that most of this aid never reaches civilians. Distribution is hindered by a mix of insecurity, logistical chaos, and rigid control measures. The so-called sterile zone, created for aid access in southern Gaza, has been widely condemned as inadequate and unworkable. The United Nations and organizations like WHO and WFP have called out the restrictions, warning of deliberate starvation. And yet, political and military decisions continue to trump humanitarian imperatives. This is not just a policy failure, it is a moral catastrophe. The politics of silence and selective outrage. International criticism is growing. Leaders, UN agencies, and human rights groups are increasingly vocal, with some calling Israel's blockade and military campaign a form of collective punishment. But for all the rhetoric, the international response remains timid and fragmented. Western governments, particularly those aligned with Israel, often frame the crisis solely through the lens of security. But security that comes at the cost of starving children is not stability, it is state-sponsored suffering. Too often, geopolitical alliances and the politics of fear override humanitarian principles. As a result, Gaza's children are being denied not only food but also dignity, protection, and global solidarity. What moral leadership really looks like? This is a defining moment for global leadership. Words are not enough. Condemnations without action are echoes in a void. Here's what moral leadership would look like: immediate humanitarian corridors, unhindered, secure access for aid backed by international guarantees, not political goodwill. International monitoring, deploy independent observers to oversee aid distribution and ensure compliance with humanitarian law. Ceasefire with purpose, a negotiated ceasefire aimed not just at halting conflict but enabling relief, reconciliation, and recovery. Accountability mechanisms, nations and institutions must demand accountability for violations of international law regardless of who commits them. Empathy-driven diplomacy, political decisions must be guided by the human cost, not strategic calculus. This isn't just a Gaza crisis, it's a global mirror. When children starve and the world justifies it in political terms, we must recognize we're not witnessing the failure of a region, we're witnessing the erosion of our collective humanity. This crisis in Gaza is not just about one conflict. It is about how the world treats the powerless. It is about whether human rights are truly universal or selectively applied. It is about whether we will continue to let geopolitics render some lives disposable. Conclusion: how will history remember us? As we read headlines about Gaza's starving children, we are not just passive observers, we are moral participants. Our silence enables suffering. Our outrage can mobilize change. In the face of famine, siege, and systemic neglect, it's time to do more than mourn. It's time to act with clarity, courage, and conscience. So we must ask ourselves, when the next child in Gaza cries from hunger, will the world still be watching, or will we finally be responding?